You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
وتكلم من هناك لشوارزنيجر
Pegarle Ronaldinho Gaucho. Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! 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 ¡Golazo!
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
Good day, good night, and welcome to Soccer Today. Kevin Laramee here. Duane is on assignment today, joining me to talk about a crazy week in MLS where a lot of new markets have arisen. Jonathan Tannenwald of the Philadelphia Inquirer. Jonathan, first of all, out of the 12 market, which one gets you going this week? Which one surprised you? Let's just start this way.
Well, can I tell you a market that surprised me this week that's not one of the 12?
Of course, absolutely.
Philadelphia.
And what did
Believe it or
Philadelphia
not.
positively surprise you or negatively?
Positively surprised
Okay,
me.
so that's why.
The signings they've made have made the union a lot better.
Well, let's start there, Jonathan. Which one are you talking about, and what can you tell us about the new signings for
Well,
the
there's
Philadelphia
a
Union?
number of them. Haris Mendunjanin, the Bosnian midfielder, I think is going to be the most important one. He really completes the midfield. And by the way, to your listeners, yes, I was being a little sarcastic and trying to lead you, Kevin, in a certain direction. I'm flying completely blind here on the show. I had no idea what the first question was going to be. But we'll get to the fact that I think MLS needs to be in St. Louis as soon as possible. We'll get there in a minute. I really like the moves that the Union have made this offseason. Haris Mendunjanin in the central midfield. Fafa Picault, the one-time U.S. national team prospect, perhaps could be again someday down the road. The way things, if he plays well with the Union. Giuliano Wijnaldum, the Dutch left back, who I think is going to end up being a starter. I don't know if he will be on opening day because the Union opened in Vancouver, and that turf is a little bit of a rough way to introduce a foreign player to MLS. But then the big question mark will be Jay Simpson at striker. But other than that, I really like the moves that the Union have made this offseason. And so to answer your actual question, which I guess I should finally do, shouldn't I? To me, St. Louis has to be at the top of Major League Soccer's list. Even though they don't want to say it, they have to get that done. It is one of the truly great soccer markets in American history, and it is one that a lot of people don't know even now the full potential of. And I think that's where, if they get a stadium deal done, I think MLS will absolutely go there, and they have to, and everybody knows it.
I have to agree with you, but with the St. Louis situation, it's the owner group, right? Because it's talk about ownership all week. It makes a big difference. And when you look at the other ownership group in certain bids, me again, my dark horse, but I don't even consider it a dark horse anymore. Detroit, with the type of bid that they presented to MLS on Monday, Detroit cannot be not one of those teams, in my opinion. They have to be. But it seems that St. Louis, they're just missing maybe that ownership group aspect to really check all those boxes.
I think St. Louis has the ownership group. What they don't have is a willingness to completely privately finance the stadium. And what it will come down to in the end is whether a deal can be struck, perhaps with a referendum at some point, sorry, I'm in downtown Boston by the boat terminal. So the sound your listeners here in the background is what we call natural sound in the business of a boat honking its horn. What St. Louis is going to come down to is whether they can strike a financing deal for the stadium. Will the owners agree to privately finance the whole thing? Will the public agree to some amount of taxpayer financing? If that happens, I think it's a lock.
Well, let's go to, again, just Detroit for a second, because for me, it's my second choice. Okay, if I was Commissioner Garber, or, yeah, well, my two are St. Pete and Detroit. Why? Because of when you're looking at MLS, ownership is important. And when you're looking at who the ownership for Detroit could be, talking about the owners of the Cavs, talking about owners of other big Detroit franchises, owners of the Pistons. You're talking about a redevelopment for the city of 200 million construction development that would bring some vitality back to Detroit. For all those reasons, for me, Detroit is I'll use it. It's a sexy bid for me, Detroit.
Well, Detroit is a sexy bid for me because it's a large population center that doesn't have a team, and that more than anything. When I look at expansion bids, I look at population sizes of markets. I look at the number of soccer fans in those markets, and that for me is where Detroit ticks the boxes. But in terms of my priorities, I'm not sure Detroit is one of my four. Believe it or not, it's up there. I think San Antonio is my second choice behind St. Louis because it's a big population center and also with a big Hispanic population, which, as we know, is something that MLS needs to emphasize and would have immediate rivalries with Dallas and Houston. Now, obviously, Detroit would have rivalries with Minnesota and Chicago and Columbus. We know that. But it still is something to think about. I like San Diego. I'm not entirely sold on San Diego. Because Tijuana over the border is big competition, and I also I can't help thinking that San Diego is not always a market that strongly supports teams in terms of attendance. So I'm a little wary. My dark horse is North Carolina. I think the Raleigh-Durham market could be sensational for Major League Soccer. I think it's big enough, although it's going to be a little on the small side. I think that it's got a fan base and a core and an ability to appeal to the kind of fandom that soccer creates, which we know is not always easy to do. But I think you look at the way that Raleigh supports college sports teams, especially basketball. The path is there for them to support soccer teams as well. Yeah. They have one now in North Carolina FC, and with the added bonus, and I don't think this is a small thing, of having the North Carolina Courage NWSL team. Stephen Malik, the owner of that organization, is clearly making moves and is becoming influential in the American soccer community. I like that very much.
Now, when you're looking at the decision process, Jonathan, there's many speculation this week. Oh, they're going to go geographically. They're going to go with just the highest bidder. They're going to go with what they know more. How would you decide? Does one of the choices of the two or the four influence the other one? I mean, as if you put Tampa St. Pete, does it give Southern team less of a chance of being that second one? If you give an Eastern one, does it obligatory give it a Western one? That's what I'm asking, Jonathan. Do you think?
Yes, I think there is. I think there is an obligation for balance to a degree because you want the conferences to be evenly matched in terms of the number of teams. I think that's absolutely right. But I think in that sense, the competition is really between Sacramento and San Diego. And we need to talk about Sacramento because all of a sudden, what seemed to be a surefire lock for a team is a big mess.
It is a big mess. On the tomorrow. Well, sorry about that. Let me rephrase my sentence here. Yesterday, there was a meeting at City Hall in Sacramento. Mayor Steinberg have met with the two parties, and there's other meetings going to take place today. So we'll see how that shapes. But you're right. The mess, let's call it this way, the mess in Sacramento have probably derailed their bid for this time around. Sacramento, you mentioned, was maybe a surefire bet to get into this round. Do you think Sacramento is going to be left in the cold?
I think it could be. I think it's possible. I mean, look, it's certainly possible that this will all get cleaned up and then everything will be fine by the time the decision is made. I would say I'm not convinced on Sacramento as a market. I never have been. I think I've made that pretty clear to folks. But I just, I'm not sure they're big enough. And as I've said a couple of times in recent weeks and will continue to say, at some point, some of these markets have to be second division teams, have to have second division teams or third division teams. Not everybody's going to be able to get into MLS. And I know it's very tempting for MLS to want to keep expanding endlessly. They shouldn't. They need to shut the door at some point. And, and then start to build really make a statement that will help build the infrastructure for the lower divisions of soccer in North America. And that includes Ottawa and Edmonton and Calgary and places like that, by the way. And for the folks out there who want to have promotion and relegation, as I know so many people do, I believe that the way you get there is to shut the expansion door and then force these teams to build up their infrastructures at the lower levels and then prove that the foundation is there for promotion and relegation. I think that has to come before Pro-Rel happens, Kevin.
Jonathan, to finish the show with you today, the first segment, I'm wondering a few questions. Be your perception of the offseason. I haven't talked to you since MLS have started to tell us the amount of allocation money they were giving and trading. And I don't know about you, but I'll speak for myself. It has been enlightening in how now you can actually compare trade. Now you can actually see what's going on. What are your thoughts on MLS and its transparency in 2017?
It was high time. It was absolutely time. And I think, you know why it happened? Because the owners were okay with it. The time came, enough of the owners said, look, let's just do it. Why? What do we have to hide? And the answer was they didn't have anything to hide. Has said, and as we've all said, it makes for the hot stove. It keeps you and me in business, and not, the media don't matter. We know that, but it gives the fans things to talk about in the off season, and it helps Major League Soccer's place on the global stage by establishing what some of the financial values for these players are. There's no, again, I don't think there's anything to hide. I think it's fine, and I think MLS benefits ultimately from greater transparency. We've all said that over and over again. Don Garber has said it was going to come in time. And then you know what? They just decided, okay, let's just do it. And here we are. They did it. Did it hurt? No, it didn't.
No, and we all were surprised by it. It happened at the draft and boom. And then nothing was said. Just, okay, it's going to be like this going forward. And everybody's like, okay, we can deal with this. It's very interesting. All right, Jonathan, it's going to be a great weekend of soccer. And we've talked about many different topics of soccer over the years. Tomorrow morning, 7:30 a.m., Chelsea Arsenal. Who you got?
I'll be asleep. I always sleep through the Chelsea Arsenal game. I cannot sit through it and stomach it. I'm always miserable during it.
All right, Jonathan.
I got one other question for you very quickly. Did I hear right? There's some chatter that Joey Saputo wants to expand the stadium.
The chatter is the renovations could be possible. The first time that he ever alluded to it, what he's talking about is making game day experience better for the fans, and infrastructure-wise, the way Stade Saputo is set up is not necessarily the best. The way crowds go in, go out, maybe rethink how players get into this the pitch literally, so it doesn't block half the crowd. The amount of permanent concession stands, stuff like bathrooms. He's talking about infrastructure, not necessarily growing the amount of attendance, not necessarily adding seats, but using the infrastructures and the space that it is available at Saputo better and more concessions and make it more streamlined. Let's use that way to streamline the fan experience.
I like the sound of that, and I also like, your listeners know I've been there many times. I like the idea of adding more entrances for the fans. I think that's something that's definitely necessary. We know the lines have gotten fairly long, especially with the security procedures in MLS being what they are now. I hope that some money goes into undersoil heating. I think they could probably get away with another game or two outdoors if they had that. And I think it would help, again, Stade Saputo really become even more of a fortress for the Impact, and remind folks further that really is the Impact's home, not Olympic Stadium down the hill. But I'm not necessarily in favor of expanding the stadium.
Exactly. That's why I was really happy. Yeah. No, go ahead.
I think that they need to not only establish demand by selling out the stadium every week, but it also will help with television and exposure if the stands are full and make it a little tough to get in. And then maybe down the road expand it. Remember, Toronto FC is not why BMO Field was expanded per se.
Yeah, there's many more reasons. Exactly.
So but Toronto FC was not the only reason. There were a lot of reasons. So I would be perfectly fine with Saputo Stadium not expanding, but those other things that you mentioned, I think would all be good ideas, and hopefully that's something we'll see down the road.
Jonathan, anything you want to promote or anything you're looking forward in the next few days?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to learning more about the National Women's Soccer League's television contract, which was announced yesterday, and that's a whole show unto itself for some other time. But there's going to be a game of the week every week now on U.S. television on the Lifetime channel, which is generally marketed towards women. They have a little bit of history of broadcasting sports with women's basketball. There's a long philosophical discussion to be had about that. But it's a 3-year deal. Lifetime has made a big commitment. They're forming a media holding company that will overhaul the website, do a mobile app with advanced statistics, which is something a lot of us who cover the league have wanted for a long time. And it is a sign that the NWSL continues to go in the right direction.
Jonathan Tannenwald of the Philadelphia Inquirer, thank you very much for joining us today.
Always a pleasure.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
And thanks to Jonathan Tannenwald for joining us to talk about expansion and other topics in the world of MLS this week. Speaking of topics in MLS, it's Friday, right? So we're going to thank Grant and we're going to go a little light on the subjects. I talk about FIFA. We all know that I'm a FIFA player. Kev Laramee on PS4, PSN. Join me and come beat me online, which is probably not that hard to do. One thing that really gets our attention when we're playing in MLS in FIFA is, well, the players don't look like they're supposed to. And that's probably going to change for FIFA 18. Jovinko got scammed this week for FIFA 18. Other players of Toronto FC. It's a traveling scanner of EA Sports that's going to make its way in different MLS locker room during training camp and the beginning of the season to get more accurate faces and looks for MLS players in MLS, and that is very welcome. A couple of big games this weekend. We have in the Premier League our games of the week. Chelsea, Arsenal, 7:30 tomorrow morning. A big game with some title kind of implication. Yes, Chelsea is 9 points clear of Arsenal, but if Arsenal wants to mount a challenge for that top spot of the table, they do have to get some points, especially against Chelsea. And if Arsenal can pull off the upset at Stamford Bridge, they will claw themselves only 6 points behind Chelsea. But if Chelsea gets the victory against Arsenal, we're talking about a 12 points lead, and now it's becoming very big. So it's a pivotal game in the Premier League between those two clubs, Chelsea and Arsenal. Arsenal literally playing their season. They win against Chelsea tomorrow morning, they are contenders. They lose, they're going to get a Premier League spot. It's that important. It's a difference between a trophy or not. Tomorrow, 7:30 a.m., Chelsea and Arsenal. The other games that are catching my attention this weekend, Leicester, Manchester United. Sunday, Leicester is not even 3 points of relegation. They're struggling. They can't mount anything. And of course, you had the players going to the Africa Cup of Nations, but it didn't really last long. Matters and Slimani didn't even make it out of the group stage with Algeria. Come back with Leicester, and the magic still is not operating in 2016-17 for Leicester. Oh, do you have to sack Ranieri? I've seen sack Ranieri, hashtag sack Ranieri, come out on Twitter and social media. I've seen articles saying, oh, maybe Leicester needs to sack him to get... No, they don't. They need to stop thinking about the champion. Stop thinking about that they are the champion. Stop thinking about the win and start focus on every single touches. Go back to what made you what you are. And that's not just last year. It's a few years before. It was a project that was a work in progress over 2-3 years. And that culminated with the Champions League, with the Premier League win, Champions League spot. But that culminated with it. You need to go back to working hard. You need to go back to keep it simple, stupid, defensively sound, moving forward, use the width, create openings, and let Vardy score like he used to. That is not happening this year. A lot of things are going wrong with Leicester, but they do need to bring it back to the basics. That's all you have to do, right? When things are not going your way, bring it back to the basics. Hull City, Liverpool. It's a rematch. But Hull, this time around, it's in the Premier League. They're struggling, bottom of the table. They need a victory. Liverpool probably not going to be easy this week, but a lot of games in the last few days for Liverpool. It's a tired squad. A squad that have been rotated quite a bit, but Klopp is not having the best of sequences with Liverpool right now. The squad management and the result garnered by this team have not been up to par and not been up to expectations. And that needs to change quickly if Liverpool doesn't even want to slide out of what could be a potential Champions League spot. Right now, they're fourth, tied with Manchester City at 46. Man United, they haven't lost since October, but they're still sixth, 42 points at six. So for those Champions League spot, if Liverpool doesn't turn it around quickly, Man City, even though they're struggling as well, for a big club, it's all relative, right? When we're saying Liverpool and Man City are struggling is when we compare them to Tottenham and Arsenal and Chelsea, not when we compare them to Sunderland. So it's always relative. But if Liverpool doesn't turn it around, not even gonna talk about a Champions contender now. We're gonna talk about a team that can slip out of Europe. That's how important the next few weeks will be, and they have a chance to go to Hull City and get that result. Hull City under Marco Silva haven't been that easy to beat, but granted, they haven't been that easy to beat all year. Hull City is a team that have played a lot better than the result shows on the box score sheets. They have played in 1-0, 2-1 losses that they actually look better and look like the side who can actually get results. I have this game in my mind of Man City, Hull City a few weeks ago where they lost 1-0, but Hull City 10 chances and were so close to winning. That is the way Hull City has played this season. They don't look as bad as the last in the Premier League, but it results that count. It's not how you look, but it's if you have the goals or not. And Hull City finds himself bottom of the table. So it's unfortunate. But Hull City to Liverpool is an important game on Saturday, 10 a.m. tomorrow. Crystal Palace, Sunderland, sliding teams. Sam Allardyce got a big win earlier this week. Can he do two in a row? And against Sunderland, David Moyes. Sunderland, they fought back the urge of selling Defoe. He's still with the Black Cats. And Sunderland, well, he has to be. He scored 70% of the goals this year. You take him out, Sunderland are definitely going down. They're still going to try to mount a challenge to not go down, but it's a relegation battle between Crystal Palace and Sunderland. The loser of this game might very well be in the championship next year, and that would not surprise me at all. The LA Galaxy in the StubHub Center announced a partnership with Long Beach Transit to offer free shuttles for Galaxy games. That is very important because where Carson City, not Carson City, just Carson, California, where StubHub Center is not in downtown LA. It's not close, and the public transit in LA is not in such a condition or efficiency that it's not easy. Like StubHub Center is not the easiest place to get to, and with that shuttle service, it might help the Galaxy go back to the crowds they had a few years ago if you bring more people into it. And from Long Beach, it makes a very good idea. Not too long of a drive, not too long of a ride. Just hop on the shuttle, go to StubHub, and watch some footy. And that seems like a good idea. So it's kind of very positive for LA Galaxy and for the fan base that are trying to go get. You need your fan to be able to get to the stadium, the bus yourself. And that is one thing that I really like about LA Galaxy. We mentioned it off the top, at the end of the show yesterday. Sebastian Blanco of San Lorenzo has signed with Portland. This is bigger signing than people give credit for. Sebastian Blanco could be a Nacho Piatti, not just because he's coming from the Argentina Primera División, and not just because he's coming from San Lorenzo, but because it's very similar type of player, very similar. Get Blanco, if motivation and can get the famous acclimatization period. Yes, I can't speak today. Like most days, you would say, and you would be right. But if he gets acclimatized quite early, Sebastian Blanco for the Portland Timbers could be like the newcomer of the year. Could be like, we're not going to call it rookie because he's not a rookie, but he's an MLS rookie. And he could very well be that player for 2017. and that will be very interesting. I want to mention again what Jonathan mentioned, the NWSL Lifetime Channel partnership for next season. It'll be interesting. Get eyes on the product, get people to watch it, and hype it up a bit more. And it seems like in 2017, with the advent of the Courage in North Carolina and other potential projects, let's just put it this way, in the NWSL, Vancouver, maybe, that would be very interesting. But the NWSL is trying to maybe combat the exodus of its players. A lot of them say they'll be back this summer, but a lot of them are in Europe right now, participating in the different leagues in France, in England, Sweden, not too bad as well, and the Champions League as well in Europe. Quite interesting. It is getting my attention more and more. Every week I start to. Women's game is it's getting to me now. Here it is. In a lot of sports right now, or in the past 10 years, there's been a lot of breakthroughs, a lot of new sport emerging, a lot of new markets being explored. There's not a lot of other sports left on the spectrum of sports to explore. And one of the last frontiers, if you want to use that analogy, is women's sports, is the NWSL. We've seen what the rise of the Ronda Rouseys of this world in UFC have created, the revenue streams they have created. There is a market for women's sports. If you don't brand it as just women and you brand it as sports and you hype it up the same way you hype up everything else that you do, you'll have the same result. You'll have the same return at the end. And I truly feel like this is one of the last frontiers that could be explored. One of the last place of growth you can have in the sports business is women's sports. And when the people at the right place, and talk about high up offices, people that take decisions in the media and in sports channels and sports properties, once they truly get behind that product, it will reap the rewards. I truly feel that it's one of the last frontiers for sports to grow as a whole. And I do feel it's a responsibility that we do have in sports to explore that frontier. So I will be taking a look at that NWSL Lifetime, and I will getting myself to watch a lot more games than I'm used to, starting this year. Thanks for listening to Soccer Today. Again, Duane Rollins on assignment today. We'll be back Monday. Talk about Premier League, a lot of good matches. We'll continue our expansion coverage. We'll probably have a guest starting next week with different markets to explain their bids, explain their pros, their cons, why we should choose them, or why maybe we shouldn't. And until then, thank you to Jonathan Tannenwald. You can follow Jonathan on Twitter at The Goalkeeper. You can follow myself, Kevin Laramee, at Kev Laramee, and follow the show. Follow Soccer Today at Soccer Today SPN. SportsPodcastingNetwork.com for more. And until Monday, have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.